All right, Avatar is just around the corner. Full set's out at this point. We're going to talk about some cards, talk about some mechanics today, talk about what's going on in this set. And first things first, I got to say, I said this in my Discord the other day. Hold me to it if I'm wrong, but I think we got a banger on our hands with this one. I think this set looks really good. It's giving me a lot of the same vibes that Final Fantasy did. My initial read on this set is it's really well crafted, really well put together. I think the mechanics are all real bangers. There's new mechanics that are cool. They brought back some previous mechanics that I think work really well in the context of the set. And, we needed this, right? The limited community really needed this after Spider-Man. So hopefully I'm right. Let's just jump in and talk about some cards because, yeah, a lot of cool stuff to talk about. So first thing to talk about here, the 4 bending mechanics: Earthbending, Waterbending, Firebending, and Airbending. These 4 mechanics, what they do, how they've been crafted, how they interact with the set, was really the first thing that kind of tipped me off to say, okay, I think they cooked with this set. Because all 4 of these mechanics, I think, are really interesting. Mark Anderson, my set review partner, the way he put it in my Discord was, these mechanics really get the juices flowing. You kind of think, okay, how am I going to use these? I think all of them kind of ask you to solve a different puzzle of how to best make use of them in the draft, like what cards to pair with them to really optimize on them. Let's talk firebending first. So we've got a card like Fire Sages, which is 1 in a red for a uncommon 2/2. And it's got Firebending 1. There's always going to be a number after Firebending. And it says, whenever this creature attacks, add red mana. This mana lasts until the end of combat. You can also pay 1 red to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So yeah, the Firebending mechanic, exactly what I'm talking about, where it's like, okay, this is a thing. It's giving you a thing. It's giving you mana, but conditional mana, how am I using this, right? How am I really putting this to best use? And a lot of firebending cards have activated abilities, like the Fire Sage. They'll give you a place to put the mana. But there's a ton of other things you can do with it. So, for example, combat tricks. One of the kind of tensions in a game of Magic, usually, when you have a combat trick in hand, is like, well, I want to be able to keep attacking, and I've got this combat trick in hand, but if I attack and they block in a way where I have to use my combat trick, I might not be able to play my 4-drop creature this turn. Firebending solves that in a lot of ways. It gives you the mana for that combat trick. It plays well with instant speed removal. It plays well with other activated abilities. The Waterbending Mechanic is a mechanic that is an activated ability, so, there's some crossover there. Plays well with cards with flash. There are clues in this set, so you can use the mana to crack clues. So yeah, the set gives you a lot of ways to use the firebending mana. Up to you, of course, to draft a deck where you can consistently use it. And I think it's a really satisfying puzzle to solve, right? It's always nice in general in any game of limited Magic to figure out, okay, how do I spend all my mana this turn? And now it's like, I've got this conditional mana that I can only use in a very small window. How am I able to use that as well? Next up, we've got the Waterbending Mechanic on a card like Katara Bending Prodigy. So this is 2 and a blue for an uncommon legend. It's a 2/3. It says at the beginning of your end step, if Katara is tapped, put a +1/+1 counter on her. And she's got Waterbend 6, draw a card. And Waterbend says, while paying a Waterbend cost, you can tap your artifacts and creatures to help. Each one pays for 1. So it's basically like Convoke and Improvise smashed together, where you can tap your creatures or artifacts to pay costs. But unlike those mechanics, it's not for casting spells. It's only on activated abilities. And there's some like cheaty ways they got around this, where it's like, as an additional cost to cast a spell, Waterbend X. There's a few of those, but for the most part, it's just on activated abilities. Another pretty cool one, I always like this kind of gameplay where it asks you to play like just a bunch of small trinkety things, then do something later with them. This plays really well with clues, of course. One card I think is going to be really, really key for making this deck tick, and also just a pretty good card. I think it's going to be one of the better commons in the format, is Forecasting Fortune Teller. This is 1 in a blue for a 1/3 common. When it enters, you make a clue token. So it makes 2 permanents to be able to tap to your waterbending abilities. That's pretty powerful. You can cash in 1 for a card later. There are also cards that care about being tapped, something like Gran, which is also, I think, a really nice one. 1 mana for a 1/2 uncommon legend. When it becomes tapped, draw a card and then discard a card. And it says non-creature spells you control cost 1 less to cast as long as there are 3 or more lesson cards in your graveyard, which is a mechanic we're going to get to in a few minutes here. Next up, we've got Earthbending. And I think out of all of the bending mechanics, this is the one that's the most straightforward, the most just like, okay, I see what I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to be smashy attacking with it. Example is Toph the Blind Bandit, 1 in a green for a star 3 legend at uncommon. When Toph enters, Earthbend 2. Which says target land you control becomes a 0/0 creature with haste. It's still a land. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. When it dies or is exiled, return to the battlefield tapped. And Toph's power is equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on lands you control. So it wakes up your lands, turns them into creatures. Worth noting, you can stack the counters, so if you earthbend multiple times, it's not like you have to wake up multiple lands, you can grow really big with one of them, or you can go by, whatever is best in the game state you're in. I also really like the clause of when this dies, return to the battlefield tapped, no feel bads going on. So yeah, this is a pretty what you see is what you get kind of mechanic. There is some synergy going on. Black-green is a deck that cares about +1/+1 counters, so this mechanic's a really good way to put counters on things. There's also kind of a cute thing going on with there are lands in this set with keyword abilities. So there's a land with vigilance, there's a land that can't be blocked. Those keywords, of course, don't do anything unless you earthbend onto them first. Yeah, definitely a straightforward mechanic, but one that I really have no complaints about. The last of the bending mechanics is airbending, and airbending says exile target something. Usually it's non-land permanent, sometimes they specify creature, but it says exile it, and while it's exiled, its owner may pay 2 to cast it rather than its mana cost. So you can do this to your stuff, you can do this to your opponent's stuff, and yeah, another mechanic that's like, that's interesting. What am I doing with this? One of the first things that comes to mind whenever you have a blinking effect is using enter the battlefield effects again, or triggering a leave the battlefield effect. So something like Momo Playful Pet has a leave the battlefield effect. Single white mana for a 1/1 flying vigilance. When it leaves, you either make a food, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, or scry 2. Another example is just any cheap creature with an enter the battlefield effect. Invasion Reinforcements, 1 and a white for a 1/1, has flash. When it enters, make a 1/1 ally token. So yeah, you might want to do this proactively. You might also want to do this reactively. You can protect your own creatures. If you're already in a pretty good spot and you're like, okay, well, I'll leave up this airbending card and my opponent has removal and I can save my creature. I think one of the coolest things you can do is airbend sagas. So there are sagas in this set. And what you can do, if you have an instant speed airbend card, which a lot of them are, is in response to the last chapter, you can airbend it, and then you get to recast it for 2 mana. So that can be a pretty powerful value engine there. And a small note I want to make for all these bending mechanics is I think they're really resonant. They really feel like you're doing the thing, right? Like waterbending kind of feels like waterbending. I think airbending feels like airbending. This is something that Magic tries to do a lot. They really try to make their mechanics resonant in a way that makes you feel like, oh, I'm actually doing this thing. And sometimes it hits and sometimes it misses. I think with these mechanics, it really hit, though. Okay, so if these bending mechanics were the only mechanics in the set, I'd say, okay, that's a lot to work with, right? But we've actually got quite a few more mechanics going on here. So one of the big ones is lessons. And if you've played Strixhaven, you might be thinking, oh, lesson learned back. Not quite. It's actually just lessons, and, I'm assuming this is like a constructed plant, because when we go back to Strixhaven in a few months, I imagine there will be more learn cards. But for this set, just spells with the lesson subtype. And that still matters, even though you can't learn for them. There are a lot of cards that care about lessons, so there are cards that care about when you cast a lesson. There are cards that go tutor a lesson from your deck, so kind of learning in some ways. There are some that care about how many lesson cards are in your graveyard. One of the best ones, I think this might be the most powerful one, is Accumulate Wisdom. 1 and a blue for an instant lesson. It's an uncommon. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of those cards into your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Put each of those cards into your hand if there are 3 or more lesson cards in your graveyard instead. So that's super duper powerful, right? Like 2 mana instant speed, look at the top 3, take 1, put the rest in your graveyard. Like that's already doing some good things for you. And then if you ever get into the mid or late game, this is 2 mana draw 3. Yeah, that's really a big game. But yeah, then we've got cards like First Time Flyer, 2 mana, 1/2 in blue. It's flying, of course. Says this creature gets +1/+1 as long as there is a lesson card in your graveyard. The blue-green archetype is an archetype that cares about lessons, among other things. It cares about lessons, sagas, and shrines, which is another thing going on in the set. The shrines are in the set. But Hermetic Herbalist, good example here. Blue-green for a 2/3, tap to add a mana of any color, or you can tap it to add 2 mana in any combination, spend this only to cast lessons. We've also got allies making a return. So a lot of these cards I've talked about today actually have the ally subtype, didn't call it out at the time. But yeah, a lot of the cards in white and green happen to be allies. And this is a theme that's a little bit more high rarity based, more in the rares and uncommons, but there's some lower rarity stuff in there too. So pretty good rare here. Great Divide Guide is 2 mana for a 2/3 ally, and each land and ally you control has tap, add a mana of any color. A lower rarity example, Master Pianda, was a 5 mana 4/4 that can attack and draw you allies from the top 4 cards of your library. So yeah, a smaller thing, but something that's kind of peppered in there here and there. And that's another thing that I really like. Whenever they pepper in a few smaller themes themes in there, right? Not just like, okay, here's the 10 color pairs and here's what we're doing. You know, think the Bloomborough experience. I think this set is kind of the antithesis of the Bloomborough experience, where yes, there's the 10 color pairs, which we haven't even gotten to talking about, by the way. All these mechanics don't necessarily slot in nicely to the 10 color pairs. There's a lot of crossover synergies. They peppered in a lot of smaller themes here and there. I mentioned this set kind of gives me Final Fantasy vibes, and that's a big reason why, where the themes aren't exactly locked into 2 colors. Another thing going on here, the shrines make a return, so we've got 1 for each color, and the template on these are, a bit different from the last time we saw shrines. Sometimes shrines are like, on your upkeep, do a thing for each shrine you control. Here it's like, when the shrine enters, you do a thing, and then when another shrine enters, you do a smaller thing. So, for example, the blue one says, when this shrine enters, you draw cards equal number of shrines you control, and then when a shrine enters, you draw a card. And like I mentioned, this is kind of baked into blue-green in its theme. There's cards that like search out for shrines, care about shrines, all that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, like I mentioned, there's the 10 color pairs that I haven't even talked about yet. And I don't think I'm going to do a deep dive on them today. We've already talked about it a lot. We'll save that for another day. But I do think it's really cool that some of these 10 color pairs, they have themes that we haven't even touched on. So, for example, Black-White has a sacrifice theme. None of the bending mechanics even, touch on sacrificing. They've crammed so many different things into this set. And one other thing, too, is for each of these 10 color pairs, there's a gold card and also a hybrid card at uncommon. Also a hybrid card at common. So really supported. Just as an example here, I'll read them out. Tolls of War is Black-White for an enchantment at uncommon. When it enters, you make a clue token, and then whenever you sacrifice a permanent during your turn, you make a 1/1 ally token. This triggers only once each turn. And then, again, we've got more crossovers with the ally stuff. That's going to matter sometimes. The hybrid is Hey Bye, Spirit of Balance. This is 2 Hybrid Orzhov for a 3/3. It says when it attacks or enters, you can sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Hey Bye. And when this leaves, put its counters on target creature you control. And then the last thing we're going to talk about today, so there is a bonus sheet in this set. I've been really talking about this set and hyping it and saying how excited I am for it, but I think this is one aspect that I can talk down a little. So there is a bonus sheet, and I don't really think it has a mechanical theme. I think they kind of just chose cards with names that fit the Avatar world. But the art on these, we were complaining about the Final Fantasy one. Some of them looked really dorky, just kind of low-quality screen grabs. They all kind of look like that for this bonus sheet. There's this one, Cruel Tutor. And the art for this, if you're not watching along, you're just listening, is like this real close-up picture of this guy's face. And I saw on Twitter earlier this week a even closer, zoomed-up version of this picture. And I was trying to find that, and I saw this, and I'm like, oh, this is it. I found it. It's so funny. This isn't even the blown up version. This is the actual legit version that you can find in packs, which, is kind of telling. So, I think a lot of the cards they chose are good for limited. That's one good thing I can say, but they're a bit of an eyesore to look at. Anyways, with that, we'll say goodbye for today. If you want to catch more content, and if you're new to the channel, by the way, a like, a comment, subscribe, all that stuff is great. But if you want to catch more content, we've got the set review that's going up on Tuesday and Thursday next week. So that's going to be Tuesday for commons and uncommons, Thursday for the rares and mythics. Every week past that, I'm going to bring you all my updated takes on the format, how I've been navigating it, what's working, what's not, all that good stuff. State of the Format Address episode, which is basically me going really deep on the whole format once it comes out in 2 weeks. Look forward to that. And yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. Like I said, excited for the set. I hope it's as good as I think it's going to be.